I worked at the post office 2 weeks ago. That's not some mysterious code phrase. I mean it literally. 2 weeks ago, I had a badge, a login, a locker, and a spot at the sorting belt like everybody else. I knew where they kept the good pens and which vending machine ate your money and never gave the chips back. I knew where the drawer was too. The one nobody outside our little department even knows exists. If you've never worked in a sorting center, you probably picture something a lot more romantic than what it is. There's no cozy front counter, no old man in a blue hat whistling while he hand stamps envelopes. It's concrete floors, conveyor belts, scanning stations, and metal cages full of packages that smell like whatever the last one leaked. I started there when I was 21. My mom said it was good government work, even though technically it wasn't. My brother said I'd last 6 months before I got bored and quit. I stayed for 13 years. I liked the routine. I liked the way the big, ugly machines could take a chaotic river of mail and sort it down to something that made sense. Zip codes, barcodes, bins, destinations. People send little pieces of their life through us and forget them 5 seconds after they drop them in the slot. We move them from one place to another so they can keep doing that. My department was tucked away on the second floor, behind a badge-locked door. No response. That's not some weird spy thing. It's literally what it sounds like. We handle the mail that isn't getting an answer. Bad addresses, illegible shit, letters to dead celebrities, to the president with no stamp, that kind of thing. We divert them, log them, and do what we're told with them. Sometimes it means shredding, sometimes return to sender, sometimes a dusty shelf until someone higher up remembers we exist. But every year, around mid-November, my job shifts just a little. They rotate me into the seasonal stuff. Officially, it's still no response. Unofficially, I become the guy who sorts the letters addressed to Santa Claus. Most people don't realize how many of those come in. They think kids just email now, or apps handle it, or parents quietly throw the letters away after patting them on the head. No, kids still write. Teachers still turn letter to Santa into a writing exercise. Churches, malls, community centers, they all tell kids to write to Santa and stick in the mail. Adults do it too, sometimes as a joke, sometimes not. The system flags the ones that can't actually go anywhere. If it sees North Pole, Santa, Father Christmas, crap like that in the destination line, and there's no valid routing code, the machine kicks it out. Those drop into a bin that gets rolled over to us. The rule is simple. We don't respond. We don't forward them to charities. We don't send them to some PR team. We don't write cute little replies on official letterhead. We stamp them no response, log the count, and file them. And we don't read them. Not all the way. That last part is drilled into you on the first day you're assigned to Santa duty. We sit in a tiny conference room that smells like burned coffee and dry erase markers while my supervisor, Denise, runs through the script everyone already knows by heart. It hasn't changed since the late 90s, according to her. Long before her, long before me. Kids sometimes share personal information, she says every year, clicking her little remote so the same slide she showed last year pops up behind her. Family problems, abuse, medical stuff, things they don't feel safe telling adults. It's not our job to invade that. We're not mandated reporters. We're not therapists. We are a sorting center. These letters were never meant for us. They were meant for Santa. We treat them as misaddressed mail and keep going. So you're allowed to skim enough to verify it's to Santa. Dear Santa, dear Father Christmas, hi Santa, it's me again, whatever. 1 or 2 lines, tops. You are not allowed to finish the letter. Ever. If the envelope's thin and you can see through it, you're supposed to flip it upside down and only look at the salutation through the back. That's how serious they take the whole no reading rule. Every new person laughs at first. You can't help it. It sounds like some weird corporate superstition. There's always one guy. There's always a guy who asks, okay, but like, what happens if we do? Denise never gives a real answer. She just says, immediate termination, in that flat HR voice that makes your skin crawl a little more than if she'd yelled. For a long time, that's all I thought it meant. You get caught reading kids' letters like some creep, they yank your badge and escort you out. Makes sense. And then 3 Christmases ago, I found out what termination really means. It didn't happen to me. It happened to a guy named Carlo. Carlo had been there longer than I had. Big dude, shaved head, stupid laugh that made everything he said sound like he was halfway through telling a joke. He had kids, brought in those sugar-dusted cookies their school sold for fundraisers, borrowed pens, and never gave them back. One December, he wasn't at a station when I clocked in. His bin was empty. His monitor was off. That happens sometimes. People change shifts, change departments, call out sick. No one said anything. Then around lunch, Denise came through with that tight, thin-lipped expression she gets when corporate is doing something she doesn't agree with but can't stop. Carlo violated confidentiality, she said, standing at the end of our row of stations, voice low but carrying. He read a Santa letter in full. He's been let go. If anyone has questions, you can take them to HR. In the meantime, you know the policy. Do not break it. Nobody laughed. Nobody made some crack about Scrooge. Even the newer people just sat there staring at their keyboards. You get a feel for energy in a place after a decade. The air that day felt clenched, like everyone was holding the same thought in their mouths and trying not to spit it out. That night, after our shift, 3 people from No Response, the ones who'd been there long enough to know better, asked if I wanted to go for a drink. They did it in that way. That wasn't really a question. We ended up at the bar 2 blocks over, the one with the sticky floors and the jukebox that only has 50 songs and they all sound the same. We didn't talk much until the second round. You live close to Carlo, right? Nora asked me. She was older than me, late 40s maybe, graying hair pulled back too tight. She trained me my first year. Yeah, I said. Why? You seen him since? He just got fired today, I said. Kind of early for a reunion. She didn't smile. Denise wasn't there. That's important. She never comes to these things. Management can't know about some stuff. Listen, Nora said, leaning in. You're on Santa detail again this year. You've been around long enough, we should tell you, so you don't get stupid ideas about playing hero. Hero? I said, it's reading mail. You think that's all this is? You're already dead, muttered Miguel from the other side of the table. He'd been at No Response even longer than Nora. Quiet guy. Always wore the same faded hoodie with the cuffs ripped. What are you talking about? I asked. Nora sighed, like she was already regretting this. Carlo didn't get fired because he read a letter, she said. I mean, he did. That's the official line. But that's not the part you need to know. You've heard the stories, right? Miguel said. About people starting to see things after they get canned from here? The Santa thing? I had heard stuff. You don't work somewhere 13 years and not absorb the local ghost stories. We all joke about cursed mail, haunted packages, shit like that. But this wasn't anyone's usual tone. That's just a stupid urban legend, I said automatically. Management's way of scaring us straight. Yeah, Miguel said. Then why do we have pictures? He pulled out his phone, thumbed through, and turned it toward me. The photo was grainy, zoomed way in. Looked like a security camera, still of a parking lot at night. You could see the headlight glare from a car pulling out a row of spaces, a few trees. And dead center, just at the edge of the light, something tall. At first, I thought it was a utility pole. That's the only thing that made sense. But the more I looked, the more wrong it got. You know how your brain tries to force things into shapes it understands? First it was a pole, then a tree, then a guy on stilts. But the proportions were off. It was too tall and too narrow at once, like someone stretched a human silhouette in the wrong direction. The arms, if that's what they were, hung too low. The legs were too straight. No bend in the knees. Like a coat rack someone had dressed in darkness. And on top of it, bright even through the static, was a Santa hat. It was almost kind of funny how ordinary the hat looked. Red cone, white band, little pom-pom hanging off one side. Cheap felt, the kind they sell in drugstores in a bin by the door. The rest of it wasn't funny. What am I looking at? I asked, voice coming out flatter than I meant. First night Carlo saw it, Miguel said, across from his building. He sent this to Nora. You expect me to believe this is? You think we photoshopped it for clout? Nora said, nobody outside this room even knows to look for it. And nobody inside talks about it unless they have to. Have to for what? I said, we've had other people break the rule, Miguel said. Before your time. Before mine. You hear about it after, when somebody you used to see every day suddenly isn't there anymore. Then somebody else quietly mentions they died. Car crash. Fell downstairs. Heart attack at 35. Always tragic, unexpected. Always around Christmas. Okay, I said slowly. And you're saying, what? That some hat thing kills them. Nora took a slow drink, set her glass down, and met my eyes dead on. I'm saying Carlo read a full Santa letter 2 weeks ago, she said. He got terminated the same day. And 3 nights later, he started texting me about a tall shadow across the street from his building wearing a Santa hat. She unlocked her phone and slid closer. A string of messages filled the screen. Hey, you ever get the feeling you are being watched? Saw something weird tonight, huh? Was probably nothing. Okay, not nothing. Looked like someone standing by the mailbox, but too tall. The messages went from joking to panicked over the next few days. It was always in the same place at first, across the street by the corner in the doorway to the laundromat. Then closer, then closer, then one last message, it's inside, and then nothing. His sister called me yesterday, Nora said. They found him at the bottom of the stairwell in his building. Broke his neck. Cameras glitched for about 5 minutes. No footy. She waited for me to laugh. I didn't. Everyone who finishes one of those letters dies, Miguel said quietly. 12 days of seeing that thing. 13, you're gone. Every time. How do you know it's 12? I asked. Because the ones who aren't in total denial start counting, Nora said. And they tell someone before it gets to 13, because deep down they're hoping someone will find a loophole. Has anyone? I whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The bartender changed the channel on the TV above us. Christmas commercials bled into a crime show. Look, Miguel said, lowering his voice. The letters. The normal ones? The Dear Santa, I want a PS5 ones? Those read just sad or funny. But sometimes there's a different kind. No stamp. No return address. Sealed with red wax. Name in pencil, just like in the manual. Those are the reason the rule exists. You pull those aside, Nora said. No scanning. No logging. Straight into the locked drawer in Denise's office. She turns them over to some regional coordinator at the end of the month. We never see them again. And the people who try to read those are the ones who, Miguel tapped the phone with the photo. See him. Him, I said. Miguel shifted in his seat. You'll call it something eventually, he said. Might as well pick something that doesn't feel as stupid as it. I walk home that night with my collar up and my hands shoved deep into my pockets, telling myself it was all bullshit. Workplace myth. Old heads scaring the newbies. That photo could have been anybody in a hat. But I still checked the shadows across from my building before I went inside. I kept the rule after that. For 3 whole seasons, I was the model no response worker. I let the normal Santa letters blur into a mess of handwriting and stickers and glitter. I saw maybe 3 of the wax-sealed ones in that time. Each time, I picked them up with my fingertips, barely looking at the name, and walked them over to Denise. She always took them without comment, locked them in the drawer, wrote something on her clipboard, turned the key. We all pretended life made sense. Then last week, I found the 12th wax letter of my career. 12th isn't a magic number. It just happens to be how many of those damn things I've seen. The first one, I remember because I went home that night and threw away the Santa wrapping paper my mom had bought. The third, because it was so crumpled the wax had cracked and I could see the edge of the page inside. The 8th, because the pencil on the front had dug so hard into the paper it almost tore. The 12th, I remember because it had my nephew's name on it. I was at my station, scanning the incoming bin like usual. I had my rhythm. Grab, flip, quick peek. Dear Santa, stamp log. Hi Santa, stamp log. Santa, if you're real, stamp log. You can kind of do it on autopilot after a while. You stop reading the words and just look for the shape of them. Then my brain snagged on a pair of letters the way your hand does when you touch something hot. The envelope was thinner than most. Real stationery, not notebook paper. No stamp, no return address. The front just said Santa Claus in the top middle and underneath in smaller letters for Lucas. The wax seal on the back was dark red, almost brown. Someone had pressed a little circle into it. Not a fancy crest, more like the end of a pen. The wax had bled out around it in uneven petals like dried blood. Lucas. It's not a rare name. There are a million Lucases out there. But the last name written along the bottom, in the same careful pencil, was mine. Not just the last name. The way the L on Lucas curved too big before shrinking back down. The way the last S drooped like it ran out of energy. I'd seen that handwriting on birthday cards on the inside of a Father's Day mug. On the note he taped to the fridge for my brother that said, "Don't eat this, it's mine." My brother has a 7-year-old son. He writes his name the same way every single time, like it's always a little too big for the space he's given. My first instinct was denial. There are other families with our last name. Other kids who write weird. That curve on the L isn't special. But my fingers were already trembling. I stood there with the envelope in my hand and the machine beeping at me in confused protest. Denise glanced over when the conveyor backed up, frowning. I forced myself to set the rest of the stack aside and act like I was fixing a jam. I slipped the letter into my hoodie pocket and felt like I'd just stolen something radioactive. The rule about wax letters was clear. Don't log, don't scan, don't open, don't look. Straight to the drawer. Straight to Denise. Instead, I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in the far stall, and took the envelope out again. Lucas. I traced the name with my thumb. The pencil had dug deep, pressing through to the back. My nephew held the pencil too tight when he wrote. His teachers complained about it in front of my brother like it was a personal failing. I should have taken the envelope straight to Denise. I knew what happened to people who didn't follow the rules. I'd seen the messages. I'd seen the photo. Instead, I called in sick. I walked out. I passed Denise's office and felt the key in her drawer like a magnet tugging at my skull. But I kept going. I went to my locker, grabbed my stuff, swiped my badge, and left the building. The air outside felt wrong. Too bright, too thin. December sunlight can do that. It's cold and sharp and makes everything look like a set piece. I drove to my brother's house without really deciding to. Muscle memory took me there. Same streets, same turns, the same pothole that never gets fixed. The whole drive, I kept telling myself there was a rational explanation. He'd gotten into my mail and decided to write a letter through me as a joke. My brother had helped him seal it with wax because he thought it looked fancy. It had never gone through the system, and I'd picked up someone else's with the same name by coincidence. I repeated versions of those excuses until they sounded flimsier than the envelope burning a hole in my pocket. My brother's house is one of those new, boxy builds at the edge of town. Gray siding, sad little patch of lawn out front, porch light that always seems too dim. There was a plastic blow-up snowman deflated on the grass, half-hearted, the kind of thing you buy on sale and forget to put away. I rang the doorbell. I could hear the TV inside. Bright cartoon noises, something my nephew had probably watched 100 times. My brother, Dan, opened the door. He looked tired. He always does lately. 2 kids, crappy commute, constant money worries. We nodded at each other in that stiff little guy way men do when they're not sure if they're about to fight or hug. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I need to talk to you," I said. My voice came out hoarse. Privately, he looked past me toward the street, like maybe there was a cop car or something I was hiding. "Is Mom okay?" "She's fine," I said quickly. It's about work. "And Lucas." His jaw tightened. He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door mostly closed behind him, letting the sound of the TV fade. "What did you do?" he said. "I didn't do anything," I said. Or at least I don't think I did. I need you to look at something, and I need you not to freak out until you read it." "Okay, that's not ominous at all," he muttered. "You're shaking. Are you on something?" "No, because if you're on something and you drove here." "I'm not," I snapped, louder than I meant. He squinted at me, then at my hands. I forced them to unclench. The envelope felt damp from my grip. "What's in your hand?" he asked. I realized I'd taken the letter out without noticing. He looked at it, and his expression shifted just slightly. Recognition, guilt, a flash of something that told me I hadn't imagined everything. "Why are you holding Lucas's letter?" he asked. That's when my stomach dropped completely. "It came to my work," I said. "In the Santa bin." He frowned. "We mail that here." He put in the mailbox by the grocery store. "You sure you're not just screwing with me?" "It was flagged as undeliverable," I said. "North Pole, no real address. It got diverted to our department. It came through my station." He snorted. "Of course it did." He thought that was hilarious, by the way, that Uncle Matt works where Santa gets his mail. "It's not funny," I said. "Can you just read it?" He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You opened my kid's mail?" "No," I said quickly. "Not yet. I mean, I opened the drawer long enough to see his name. Then I took it. I know that's bad, but You stole his letter, and now you want me to read it in front of you?" "Dan," I said, hearing my voice go thin. "Please, just read it." He grabbed the envelope out of my hand. His thumb brushed the wax seal, and his eyebrows knit. "You used my seal," he called back into the house over his shoulder, raising his voice. There was a muffled "what?" from somewhere deeper inside. "My sister-in-law, Natalie." "The wax thing from my desk," he called. "Did you help Lucas with this?" "Yeah, why?" came the reply. "Nothing," he said, eyes still on me. He turned the envelope over again, then looked me dead in the face. "This some kind of joke?" he asked. "I really wish it was," I said. He broke the seal with a soft, sticky crack. That sound is burned into my brain now. Red crumbs of wax fell onto the porch step. He unfolded the paper, and I watched the color drain from his face line by line. When he finished, he didn't say anything. He just stared at the page, not moving, like if he didn't react, it would stop existing. "It's not funny," he said finally. "I know," I said. He folded the letter in half with shaking hands. "Did you write this?" he asked. "What?" "No. Did you tell him what to write? Is this like some psych experiment you're doing to prove a point? Oh, look at how kids can be manipulated. We should take childhood more seriously. Some bullshit like that." "Jesus, Dan, no," I said. I saw his name on the envelope at work. I recognized the handwriting. I knew it was his. That's why I took it. He let out a short, harsh laugh. "You took it because you're obsessed with this Santa conspiracy shit," he said. "You've been going on about that stupid rule for years." "It's not stupid. You say the word wax every December like you're in a horror movie," he said. "You scare yourself, then you drink, then you call me rambling about the drawer like it's the fucking Ark of the Covenant. And now you show up my house with my kid's letter talking about." "Read it again," I said. Slower. He stared at me, then at the letter, then at me again. "If this is some kind of prank, why the hell would I prank you by losing my job?" I said. He blinked. "What?" "I wasn't supposed to read it," I said. "Any part of it. The wax ones go straight to the drawer. No logging, no scanning, nothing. Denise must have seen me pull it, or the cameras caught me pocketing it. I called in sick, and I didn't report it. As far as they're concerned, I violated confidentiality so hard they can't even pretend it was an accident." "So you're telling me you got fired today?" he said, like he was testing the shape of the words of his mouth. "Terminated," I said. It came out colder than I meant. "They'll deactivate my badge. I'm done. Because of this?" He flicked the letter with his finger, then flinched like it burned him. "This is the hill you chose to die on, huh? Did you actually read it?" I asked quietly. His jaw clenched. His eyes went back to the paper, almost against his will. I knew what it said because I'd broken a rule that morning before I got caught. Before Denise stepped into my peripheral vision and everything went sideways. The letter was written in pencil. Not the wobbly, backwards letter mess you expect from a 7-year-old. It was weirdly neat. Block letters, evenly spaced. "No espere mis tax. Dear Santa, thank you for the last candy." He hadn't specified what kind of candy. He just called it that in quotes every time. The way you do when you're pretending with someone you both know is in on the joke. The rest of that paragraph made my stomach twist. You were right. Mommy did stop crying after I put in her drink. She slept a long time. That's about where my brain started trying to protect itself. Words blurred. I remember little flashes. You said it was okay because it was a present, and presents are supposed to change things. You said sometimes presents have to hurt or they aren't real. You said I was a good boy for not telling Daddy. He listed good deeds after that like he was checking off chores. Taking things from the neighbor's purse. Pushing a kid on the playground too hard to see if they bleed. Hurting a cat because Santa needs to know I can do it if you ask. My nephew, my goofy, dinosaur-obsessed, glue-stick-eating nephew, had written all of that like he was proud. At the end, he said, I want to do a bigger one this year. You said stealing isn't enough now. You said the animals were practice. What do you want for Christmas? I will do it. I want to be a good boy. Love, Lucas. Is any of this true? I asked now, watching my brother's face. His lip curled. No, he said. Of course not. He's 7. He can't even reach the medicine cabinet. Natalie cry a lot lately? I asked before I could stop myself. Pills? Wine? Anything he might have gotten into. Shut the fuck up, he snapped. I'm just asking if. I don't know what you think you're doing, he said, stepping closer, crowding me toward the porch railing. I don't know if this is you having some kind of breakdown or what, but you do not come into my house waving this freak show bullshit and accuse my kid of. I'm not accusing him, I said. I'm saying something is talking to him. Oh, that's better, he barked. So my son is either a little budding serial killer or he's possessed by Santa. Great options, Matt. Real helpful. It's not Santa, I said. Not really. It's something that uses that name. It talks through those letters. The wax ones. He stared at me like he was watching me drown and trying to decide if I was worth saving. You know what I think? He said finally. I think you hate your job and your life so much that you've turned office policy into some grand cosmic war. I think you read one too many creepy stories online and decided you'd make yourself the main character. You think I wanted this? I said, my voice cracking. You think I wanted to see my nephew's name on one of those envelopes? Do you have any idea what happens to people who read them? Yeah, he said. They get fired. Congrats. Actions have consequences. You don't understand, I said. There's something that comes after. It watches you. It stands outside your house. It wears. Nope, he said, slapping his hand against the doorframe, making me flinch. We're done. I'm not listening to your ghost stories about my kid. You want to spin out and ruin your life? Go ahead. But you don't drag my family into it. Done? Get help, he said. Real help. Therapist, meds, rehab, whatever this is. Because if you honestly believe what you're saying, you're sick. And if you don't, and you're saying it anyway, you're worse. The porch light above us flickered. I noticed it for the first time then, how it buzzed every time it dimmed, like a trapped fly. Inside the house, my nephew laughed at something on the TV. It made me want to be sick. There's still time, I said quietly. If I'm right, then there's a pattern. 12 days of seeing it. Tieton, you die. I'm only a day 0. Maybe if we, he repeated incredulous. There is no we. There is you, and there's my family, and there's a very clear line between them now. Please, I said, just don't let him write any more letters. Don't let him. Get out, he said. Done. Get the fuck off my property, he said, voice low and shaking in that way that means it's about to snap loud. If you ever show up here talking about my son like this again, I call the cops. You understand me? He didn't slam the door in my face. That's almost worse. He closed it slowly, deliberately, and I heard the lock click like a period at the end of a sentence. I stood there on the porch for a full minute, listening to the muffled cartoon noises and my own stupid heartbeat. My hands were empty. At some point, he'd kept the letter. The porch light flickered a few more times, then went out for good. That was when I saw it. At the end of the street. Something tall. At first, my brain did what brains do. Tree, lamppost, tall guy in a long coat. Then it stepped just slightly out of line with the background, and all of those excuses died. It didn't move like anything that has joints. It didn't move much at all. It just adjusted, like the world around it had shifted and it was correcting for it. It was too far away to see any details, but I didn't need them. The outline was enough. Too tall, too narrow, arms too long, head tilted slightly downward, like it was looking straight at the spot on the porch where I stood. On top of that warped silhouette was a bright, stupidly ordinary Santa hat. I felt my knees try to fold. I grabbed the porch railing hard enough my fingers hurt. "Okay," I whispered to nobody. "Okay, okay." Headlights swept past as someone turned the corner. The light went through it. Not around, not blocked, not casting a shadow. Straight through, like it was a glare on a window. Nobody slowed down. I walked down the steps like I was trying not to wake a sleeping giant. My entire body screamed to me not to turn my back on it. I did anyway. I forced myself to get into my car, start the engine, and pull away from the curb. I kept expecting it to suddenly be in my rearview mirror, inches from the glass. It stayed at the end of the street, watching hat bright against the dark. By the time I got home, it was there already. My apartment building's on a narrow, one-way street. There's a busted lamppost directly across from it that only works half the time. Tonight, the light had decided to show up. The thing stood just beyond that crooked circle of light, so tall it made the three-story walk-up beside it look stunted. The lamppost barely reached its thigh. The Santa hat perched on top like an insult. I parked further down the street than usual. My hands slipped on the steering wheel. Maybe it's stress, I told myself out loud, saying it made it sound less convincing. I sat there with the engine off and the heater ticking, staring through the windshield. The glass fogged around the edges for my breath. Every time I blinked, I expected it to vanish like a trick of the light. It didn't. It just stood there, longer than anything that isn't a building or a tree should be able to stand without shifting. A woman walked by with a grocery bag, keys already in her hand, eyes on her phone. She walked straight through the space it occupied. No flinch, no detour, no sign she just bisected something that shouldn't exist. That should have helped. It didn't. If anything, it made me feel more trapped, like it had chosen me and the rest of the world was a movie set around us. After 20 minutes of staring, my eyes started doing that watery, static thing where everything looks like it's moving. My reflection floated faintly in the window, superimposed over the street. For a second, I thought the Santa hat was sitting on my head, perfectly aligned. I jerked back and squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, it was still standing where it had been. Eventually, I forced myself to get out of the car. I walked to my building without looking directly at it, like a kid pretending not to see the monster so it couldn't see me. Inside, my apartment felt too small. The walls too close, the ceiling too low. Every window was a weak point. I didn't close the curtains that night. Some part of me wanted to know if it would move when I wasn't looking, if it needed darkness, or if the not knowing would be worse. So I left them open and lay on my couch with the TV off, staring at the rectangle of night and the faint shape at the edge of the street. Around midnight, the Santa hat shifted. Not much. Not enough to say it definitely moved. But one moment it was angled a little to the left, and the next it was straight, like gravity had been recalculated. I didn't sleep. When morning finally bled through the glass, my eyes felt like sandpaper. I rolled off the couch, joints popping. My phone said 6:12 a.m. I dragged myself to the window. He was closer. On the second day, he stood directly across from my building, under the lamppost. In normal light, if you can call that sickly sodium glow normal, he made even less sense. The outline was clearer, and somehow that made the whole thing feel more wrong. His shoulders were where a person's shoulders should be, but there was something off about the way they connected to his neck. The arms hung too straight, like someone had drawn lines down from the shoulders to the knees and called it a day. No wind, no slack, just these long, black bars that ended in hands I couldn't quite focus on. If you've ever stared at one of those illusions, the magic eye ones where if you look long enough, a shape pops out, it was like that in reverse. The longer I looked, the less detail I could see. It was like my brain refused to make it real. But the hat was crisp, bright red, white band like cheap foam, a little puff on the end that never moved, not even when the wind picked up. I showered without taking my phone into the bathroom because for some reason I was afraid it would show up in the reflection in the screen or in the fog mirror behind me. That's the kind of nonsense logic you start using when you already know things are broken. Usually, I'd be at work by then, drinking bad coffee and stamping no response on kids' letters. Today, I didn't have to be anywhere. Every part of me that wasn't actively freaking out wanted to crawl back into bed and pretend I had the flu. The part of me that remembered Carlo's messages knew that was a fantastic way to speedrun whatever the hell this thing had planned. So I put on my shoes and went outside. The air slapped me in the face. Cold, wet, early winter air with that faint metallic taste of snow that hasn't quite committed yet. He was still there, maybe a little closer to my side of the street. It was hard to tell. Our eyes met, or at least that's what it felt like. I couldn't see eyes, just a darker patch where a face should be. But there was a weight in the air, like walking into a room where someone had just been screaming. I walked anyway. As I passed the spot where he should have been, that pressure behind my eyes got worse. Not pain exactly, more like the feeling you get when you've forgotten something important. That panicked, half-remembered ache. It lasted less than a second. I turned the corner and looked back. He was still where I'd left him, still watching. Okay, I muttered. Okay, I didn't have a job to go to, but muscle memory still dragged me in the direction of the post office. Halfway there, I realized what I was doing and stopped dead on the sidewalk. What was I going to do exactly? Walking like nothing had happened? Asked Denise for my job back while there was a 12-foot Santa nightmare tailing me? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Denise. HR will be mailing you paperwork. Your badge has been deactivated. Please do not attempt to access the building. No, im suri. No good luck. Just policy. I thought about texting her back. Thought about asking her if she had ever seen it. If she knew what happens to people like me. If she felt even a little guilty turning wax letters over to whoever took them away at the end of the month. Instead, I put my phone on airplane mode. That night, I dreamed about red wax softening in my hands. When I woke up, my palms were clenched so tight my nails had dug little crescent moons into my skin. On the third day, he was in the parking lot. I found out when I went out to my car, thinking maybe I could at least drive somewhere, anywhere that wasn't here. The grocery store, a movie, my mom's house, somewhere with normal problems. The lot behind my building is small. 6 spaces cramped, hemmed in by a chain-link fence and a brick wall. My car was in the far corner. He was between me and the exit. Up close, the wrongness of his proportions was worse. Each part of him made a kind of sense on its own. Yes, that's an arm, that's a torso, that's a head, but they were put together like someone had assembled a human body by description only, never having seen one before. I stopped 3 steps out the back door. A guy I recognized from the 3rd floor came down the stairs behind me, headphones in, nodding to his own soundtrack. He walked past me, weaving a little. He walked right through the thing's midsection to get to his car. He shivered when he passed that spot, like he'd walked through a cold draft. He rubbed his arms, glanced at the sky, then unlocked his car and got in. He'd gone through its chest. Its arms, those long, black bars, hung on either side of him without moving. The Santa hat sat crisp and ridiculous on top of everything. For some reason, that was the moment I felt my anger catch up to my fear. I lost my job because I cared enough about a kid to break a rule that shouldn't exist in the first place. I was being haunted by something that couldn't even be bothered to move like a normal monster. My brother thought I was insane, and my nephew was writing cheerful murder updates to Santa. Fuck this thing, I thought. I walked down the steps, heart banging against my ribs, and marched across the lot. I walked around it, close enough that if it had a smell, I would have noticed it. It didn't. Or maybe it smelled like nothing, which is somehow worse. I didn't reach out and touch it. I'm not that stupid, but I came close. Close enough that if it had reached for me, I wouldn't have had time to flinch. Nothing happened. My breath came out in little white bursts. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. The silence around us felt thick, like the noise of the city had been turned down a notch in a radius around its body. I got into my car, hands shaking. I started the engine and, without thinking, turned onto the road that led to the post office. By the time I realized where I was headed, I was already halfway there. Old patterns are hard to break. My whole body had been programmed for years to go from bed to car, to parking lot to badge reader. I pulled over in front of a laundromat instead, the one I'd seen in Carlo's photo. People went in and out with baskets of clothes. Nobody looked up. Nobody looked at me, sitting there with my engine idling, breathing too fast. I turned the car off and let my head fall back against the seat. That was only day 3. That was only day 3. I wish I could tell you there was some big turning point there, some moment where I figured out the rules and started fighting back. Mostly I just kept breathing and trying not to throw up. The rest of that day blurred. I drove around in circles. I parked in random lots and sat there until my legs tingled from not moving. Every time I glanced at a glass door or a window, I expected to see a red triangle sitting on something impossibly tall. Sometimes I did. Most of the time it wasn't there at all, and that almost made it worse. It made me feel like I was blinking in and out of the same nightmare, not sure when I'd wake up and when I wouldn't. I went home before dark because I couldn't stand the idea of seeing him cross the line into the building. He didn't need to use doors. I knew that already. I'd watched that guy walk through his chest like air. But there was still something about thresholds, about the concrete line of outside and inside, that my brain clung to like a superstition. He was back across the street when I pulled up in roughly the same place he'd been that morning. Like he clocked out for lunch while I was gone and returned to his post. I kept my eyes on my own front door and went inside. That night, I thought about calling Nora. I even brought her contact up on my phone, her name, the little ID photo she'd used, a blurry shot of a backyard grill. I stared at the number for a full minute. What was I going to say? Hey, remember how you told me reading a wax letter would make a 12-foot Santa thing stalk me for 12 days and then I die? Well, good news, you were right. They'd already watched this play out a dozen times. She knew how the story ended. Maybe she'd answer, maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd hear my voice and just start crying. In the end, I put my phone face down on the coffee table and watched the ceiling instead. I could feel him out there like a migraine. On the 4th day, he came inside. I didn't notice at first. I tried to be normal that morning, whatever that meant now. I took a shower. I brushed my teeth. I boiled water for coffee instead of using the machine because the grinding noise sounded too much like the sorters at work. The TV played some morning show in the background. Smiling hosts with perfect hair talking about holiday recipes and gift guides. Every other ad had a Santa in it. I flinched at each one. By noon, I was out of food and cigarettes and excuses. Staying inside hadn't saved anyone else. Hiding in my apartment just meant I got to watch him through one window instead of several. So I went to the grocery store. You can't really appreciate how bright supermarkets are until you feel like you're decomposing in the light. Everything buzzed. The refrigerators, the ceiling lights, the shitty Christmas music coming out of the speakers. Santa Claus is Coming to Town played while I picked up a handbasket and reminded myself how to walk like a person who wasn't on the edge of screaming. I made it through produce. I made it down the cereal aisle. I avoided the holiday display near the front with the red hats piled in a cheap cardboard sleigh. Everything felt wrong, but wrong in that everyday way I'm used to. Crying kids, carts blocking the aisle, people parking diagonally like they're the only ones in the lot. Normal dystopia. Then I turned into the frozen section. He was at the far end of the aisle where the freezers met the back wall. He didn't fit. That was the first thing my brain latched onto. The ceiling was maybe 10 feet up, but he was taller. Did he bend? Did the world stretch to accommodate him? I couldn't tell. He was just there all at once. Head almost brushing the row of hanging signs that said things like ice cream or desserts. Arms hanging straight, fingers almost grazing the linoleum. Smack in the middle of the aisle. The glow from the freezer doors reflected off the floor in a pale streak, passing under the space where his legs should have cast a shadow. He didn't show up in the glass. He was just cut out, like someone had taken a stencil of him and dropped it into the air without bothering to render it in the reflections. His hat was perfect, crimson against all that humming white. I stopped so abruptly that my basket swung and hit my leg. A woman with a toddler in the cart pushed past me, irritated. "Excuse me," she muttered, brushing my shoulder. She walked right through him. Her head passed through his stomach. The kid's sticky hand would have been at about thigh level. The kid giggled at the blast of cold as they passed the freezer vents, reached out for the fog on the door, and smeared it with his fingers. Neither of them reacted to the fact that they'd just bisected something that shouldn't exist. I dropped the basket. It hit the floor and rolled onto its side, apples thumping across the tiles. I left them. I left the cart traffic jam I'd just created, the muttered curses behind me, the store entirely. I walked out into the biting cold with my heart in my throat and my hands empty. This was the part in a story where people start making detailed plans. They map out escape routes. They research the monster. They break into forbidden archives. I walked around the block 3 times and went home. That night, I couldn't look at my freezer without seeing that tall shape at the end of it. Christmas music started to sound like a countdown. Every jingle bell felt like a clock tick. On the 5th day, he followed me to my brother's street. I hadn't planned on going back there. After the way he'd kicked me out, you'd think I'd avoid that cul-de-sac like it was radioactive. But worry will drag you places pride can't. I told myself I was just driving by, just checking. I could make a loop, in out, no stopping. See the house, see that it wasn't on fire, see that my nephew didn't have a Santa hat growing out of his skull. I turned into their subdivision and felt my throat get tight. All those Christmas decorations, plastic reindeer, inflatable snowmen wheezing in the cold. A full nativity scene in 1 yard. The baby Jesus lit up like a touchdown. My brother's house was halfway down the block. The porch light was on again, softer now that it had been replaced. The blow-up snowman was fully inflated this time, arms spread like it was greeting me. And there, on the sidewalk right in front of their porch, he stood. He was so close his feet almost touched the first step. If he took one more non-existent stride, he'd be inside the house. My car idled. I didn't pull into the driveway. I didn't think my brother would open the door for me, and even if he did, I didn't trust myself not to lose my shit on the carpet. I parked on the other side of the street, a few houses down, where I could see the front of the house and him in one frame. He didn't move. He didn't turn toward me. He just stood there, facing the house. My brother came out about 10 minutes later, wearing his old hoodie and holding a trash bag over one shoulder. Lucas was right behind him, in socks despite the cold, hopping from foot to avoid the icy spots. "Lucas, for the last time, shoes," I heard my brother say faintly. He walked through that space, through that impossibly tall, impossibly wrong body, through its chest, its stomach, its resting arms. Lucas followed, little head tipping back to look at his dad. His hair stuck up in the back. There was a streak of chocolate or something on his cheek. He ran through the same space, the little idiot, laughing when his bare feet hit the cold porch boards. He never shivered. They went back inside. The porch light clicked off behind them. The thing stayed. My phone buzzed. I half expected it to be my brother telling me to stop lurking outside his house like a creep. Instead, it was my mom. "Hey, honey, heard about the job from Dan. Call me when you can." My brother moved fast when he wanted to. I looked at the house. I looked at the thing at the foot of the steps. I imagined explaining any of this to my mother in a way that didn't sound like I'd finally snapped. I texted back, "Phone is messed up, I'll call later." Then I turned the car around and left the subdivision. The thing stayed on the sidewalk, watching the house, hat bright under the winter sky. On the 6th day, I tried to explain it to someone who wasn't already contaminated. Not the full truth. I'm not stupid. Even now, with my life circling the drain like this, I know the difference between I'm under a lot of stress and there's a 13-foot Santa cryptid stalking me for reading a cursed letter. I called the non-emergency line first. "Police," the dispatcher said. "Is this an emergency?" "Not exactly," I said. I'm seeing someone around my building. A person. They're tall. They're always there. They don't move." "What do you mean they don't move?" she asked. "They stand," I said, "across the street, in the parking lot, in places. They don't touch anybody. They don't say anything. They just watch, I think, and nobody else seems to see them." There was a pause on the line. I could practically hear her flipping through mental training binders. "Sir, are you saying there's someone stalking you?" she asked. "Yes," I said, then hesitated. "No, not like a regular stalker. It's more like, have they threatened you?" She cut in. "Verbally, physically?" "No." "Have they tried to enter your home?" "If you only knew." "No," I said. "Not exactly." "Okay, so there's an unknown person who makes you uncomfortable," she said, voice smoothing into a practice tone. "We can send a patrol car to cruise the area, but if they're not actively trespassing or making threats, there may not be much the officers can do." "Right," I said. She softened. "It might help to talk to someone too," she added, "if you're feeling unsafe or anxious. I can give you numbers for some crisis lines and mental health resources in the area." There it was. The word. Crazy but polite. "Yeah," I said. "Sure. Give me the numbers." I wrote them down on a receipt by the phone, my handwriting getting tighter and messier as she rattled them off. I called one of the therapists. The soonest appointment was 3 weeks out. "Tell me what's going on in a few words," the receptionist said cheerfully. "I lost my job," I said. "I'm having trouble sleeping. I feel watched." "Okay," she said, still in that bright tone. "Any thoughts of hurting yourself or others?" "No," I said, and meant it. "I don't want to hurt anybody. I especially don't want to hurt myself. That's kind of the whole problem." "Okay," she said. "We'll email you some intake forms. Fill those out before the appointment." By that night, I had 3 voicemails from my mom, one from an unknown number I assumed was HR, and one from my brother, a flat, "Don't drag mom into this." I didn't answer any of them. I closed my curtains for the first time since this started. It felt like admitting defeat, but I couldn't stand the sight of him anymore. Every shift, every angle, every tiny adjustment of that hat made my skin crawl. I still felt him, though. I lay in bed in the dark, watching the faint lines of light leak around the edges of the curtain, and I knew he was on the other side of that wall. Not looking in, he didn't need to. He knew where I was. My building creaked and settled. Somewhere above me, someone laughed too loud at something on TV. A siren wailed and faded. Under all of it, there was the sense of something still and towering standing just out of sight. On the 7th day, I met him in the elevator. I've been timing my errands to avoid other people, leaving my apartment at weird hours to minimize the number of witnessable freakouts. That morning, I thought I had it perfectly. 10:37 a.m., right between the early workers and the lunch crowd. I pressed the elevator button and listened to the familiar clunk of it starting its slow descent. The doors slid open. He was inside. He didn't fit. Again, but there he was, all the same, occupying a space that should have been too small, like the elevator had been resized around him. His head tilted slightly to avoid the fluorescent light. The Santa hat brushed the angled metal ceiling but didn't crumple. A woman stood there too, in scrubs, staring at her phone. She had one foot propped against the wall, heel off the ground. Her back was pressed directly against his leg. I don't know how to explain this without sounding like I'm lying, but it's almost like my brain did me a kindness for a second. It fuzzed him out, turned him into a vaguely darker corner, a shape you'd dismiss if you weren't looking for it. If you'd never seen the hat before, then my eyes focused and the blur snapped into his outline. He took up more than half the elevator. Those long arms ran down either side of the car, fingers almost brushing the floor. The woman's ponytail was inches away from where his hand should have been. She shivered, reached up, rubbed the back of her neck. "It's freezing in here," she muttered, talking to nobody. I stepped in like a sleepwalker. My heart hammered behind my ribs, but my legs moved on their own. The doors slid closed. We went up. The elevator groaned like it was under too much weight. I stared at the floor numbers, willing them to change faster. I caught a glimpse of us in the warped metal of the doors. Me, pale and sweaty. Her, scrolling through her phone. Him, not there at all. Just a blank slice where he should be. Cold rolled off him in waves. Not the kind you feel on your skin. More like the temperature dropped directly in your bones. Ding. Second floor. Ding. Third. The woman stepped out on 4. She walked through his hip, rubbing her arms. I got off on 5, even though I lived on 7. The doors closed behind me with a solid clunk. I took the stairs the rest of the way, legs shaking. I didn't use the elevator again after that. That afternoon, my mom knocked on my door. "Matthew," she called. "Are you in there?" Her voice always gets that formal when she's worried. When I was a kid and she'd catch me sneaking out, it was always Matthew, never Maddie or Matt. I froze halfway between the kitchen and the living room. My eyes flicked to the window automatically, even though the curtains were closed. I could feel him out there like static under my skin. "Matthew, open up," she said. "I know you're in there. Your car's downstairs." I considered not answering, just waiting her out until she gave up and left. But that's the thing. If I died and she realized she'd been knocking at my door the day before, she would never forgive herself. I'd be dead, but I'd still know. I opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered, standing there with her purse strap clenched in both hands. That same tired coat she'd had for years. The same lines around her mouth, deeper now. "Oh, honey," she said, and stepped in to hug me. I flinched before I could stop myself. My eyes flicked over her shoulder. The hallway seemed normal. Beige carpets. Smell of someone's cooking. No Santa hats. I hugged her back. "You look awful," she said bluntly when she pulled away. "When was the last time you slept?" "Soon as they invent a unit of time smaller than never, I'll let you know," I said. It was supposed to be a joke. It came out flat. She frowned. "Dan said you got fired," she said. "What happened?" "I broke a rule," I said. "It doesn't matter." "Of course it matters," she snapped. "You've been there 13 years. You can't just shrug and say it doesn't matter." "Were you stealing? Drinking on the job? Fighting?" "No." "Then what?" "I read something I wasn't supposed to," I said. "A letter. A letter to Santa. Lucas's letter." Her face shifted the same way my brother's had. "You got my grandson fired?" she said, half joking, half not. "It's not his fault," I said quickly. I recognized his name. His handwriting. I could not. And I opened it and I shouldn't have. I wish I hadn't. I really fucking wish I hadn't. "Language," she said, automatic, then shook her head. "What did it say?" I looked toward the window again. The curtains thin enough for light, but not for shapes. "Stuff a kid shouldn't say," I said. "Stuff he shouldn't know." "Like what?" she pressed. "Like thanking Santa for teaching him how to give presents that make things stop," I said quietly. "Like talking about making Natalie stop crying. Like accidents that don't feel like accidents." She stared at me, lips parted. "That's not funny," she said. "I'm not trying to be funny," I said. "I wish I was." "Dan said you accused Lucas of hurting people," she said slowly. "I said something was using him," I said. "Talking to him. Through those letters." "You hear yourself, right?" she said, angry now. "You know how you sound?" "Crazy," I said. "Yeah, I know." She looked at me the way she had when I was 13, and she found cigarettes under my mattress. Like she was trying to figure out where she'd gone wrong. "Honey, I know you love that job," she said. "I know routine is important for you, but sometimes things just happen. People get laid off. Policies change. You can't make up this whole horror story to avoid dealing with it." "It's not made up," I said. "It's real. It's outside." "Outside what?" "Here," I said. "My building. Their house. Everywhere." She glanced at the window despite herself. "Is someone bothering you?" she asked. "A supervisor? An ex-co-worker?" "Yes," I said. "No, not like that." She took my hands. Hers were warm. Mine felt like ice. "Matthew, listen to me," she said. "You need to see someone. Not just a therapist 3 weeks from now. Tonight. Tomorrow. A doctor. This sounds like stress, like a breakdown. There's no shame in that. But you can't just sit here alone in... Mom, I said, please stop. She blinked, surprised. I get that you don't believe me, I said. That's fine. I don't expect anyone to. But if you're going to stand here and tell me the fix is a bubble bath and deep breathing exercises, you might as well just leave. Because I don't have the energy to pretend that helps. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I'm trying to help you, she said, voice sharp. I drove 40 minutes to get here. I know, I said. I know. I am tired. She studied me for a long moment. Her eyes glistened. You're scaring me, she said quietly. Yeah, I said. Same. She exhaled, shaky. I'm calling Dan, she said. We'll figure something out. Maybe you can stay with us for a while. Get away from whatever this is. No, I said. It's not up for debate, she said. I'm not going to watch you fall apart by yourself. It's not about being alone, I said. It's about proximity. You'd just be moving the problem closer to them. To Lucas. Something in my tone must have gotten her, because she stopped with her hand on her phone. Her knuckles were white. Get some sleep, she said eventually. Eat something. I'll call you later. Please pick up. She kissed my cheek, squeezed my arms, and left. I shut the door behind her and pressed my forehead against it. The hallway felt thinner after she was gone, like the building was contracting around me. I peeked through the curtain just enough to see the street. He moved closer. On the 8th day, he found his way into the empty spaces. I noticed it first on my phone. You know that moment when your phone screen goes black and you catch your reflection in it? It's always unflattering. Weird lighting, distorted chin, all of that. I picked up my phone that morning to check the time. The screen was dark. For a second, I saw myself, pale, unshaven, eyes ringed with dark circles. And behind me, taking up most of the reflection, the faint outline of his hat. I spun around so fast I almost fell. The room behind me was empty. Just my crappy couch, my TV, the dent in the wall where I'd moved the table too hard one time. I looked back at the phone. The reflection was just me now. I told myself it was a trick of the light. The brain seeing faces in everything. Pareidolia. I'd read the word once. I repeated it in my head like a charm. Later, I microwaved leftover pasta. The microwave door has that dark, mesh-covered glass. You can kind of see yourself in it if the kitchen light is right. I set the timer and hit start. The turntable whirred. The hum filled the room. My reflection was there, faint. Behind me, in the doorway, something taller, hat grazing the top of the frame. I didn't turn around. It took everything I had, but I held still, staring straight at that ghost of a shape in the glass. The countdown on the display felt like the longest minute of my life. When it hit 0, the microwave beeped. The glass fogged slightly from the heat. My reflection dissolved. So did his. I opened the door and took the plate out with shaking hands. The food smelled like cardboard. I didn't eat it. All day, he popped up in every reflective surface I caught myself in. The TV screen when it was off. The bathroom mirror when it fogged from the shower. The window at night. My own face half superimposed over his empty outline in the street outside. Sometimes he was farther away. Sometimes he was right behind me. Never where I could turn and see him directly. By sunset, I turned every mirror in my apartment to face the wall. Didn't matter. I still felt him behind me every time I closed my eyes. On the 9th day, he stopped being polite about distance. Up until then, he'd had the decency to give me a buffer. Across the street, into the aisle, other side of the elevator, doorway in reflections. Not anymore. I opened my front door to take the trash out and almost walked straight into him. He was standing in the hallway, right in front of my door, hat brushing the cracked ceiling tiles. His head was tilted down in a way that made my stomach flip, like he was peering at my doorknob. I yanked the bag back instinctively, heart slamming. My arm had gone through where his body should have been to reach the doorknob. I hadn't felt anything. No resistance. No cold. Nothing. That should have reassured me. Instead, I started keeping my hands out in front of me when I turned corners. like a blind person feeling for furniture in a new room. I didn't trust the world to keep us separate. He was everywhere that day. I turned from the sink and nearly walked into his shoulder in the kitchen. I opened my closet and saw his hand brushing the hanging clothes. I reached for the remote, and my fingers grazed the empty space where his arm intersected the coffee table. Every time, there was that flash of something behind my eyes, like a memory trying to surface, like a word on the tip of my tongue. I never managed to catch it. It always slipped away, leaving behind that sick, hollow feeling in my chest. That night, he stood at the foot of my bed. I closed the bedroom door like it mattered, pushed a chair under the knob like I was 13 again and trying to keep my brother out. It didn't make a difference, of course. At some point in the night, I opened my eyes and felt it, that sense of gazes on you, of something tall blotting out the air. He was there, not in the corner, not across the room, not half in and half out of the doorway. Right at the foot of the bed, bent. That was new. Up until then, he'd always been straight like a post. Now he leaned forward, folding at a point that wasn't quite hips, wasn't quite waist. The Santa hat dipped into my field of vision, the pom-pom hanging above my knees. If he had a face, it was somewhere just beyond the boundary of what I could make myself look at. It sounds stupid to say I was too afraid to scream, but I was. My throat locked, my limbs prickled. Every survival instinct in my body was firing at once, and none of them knew what to do. For a second, one horrible, clear second, I thought he was going to keep bending. I thought he was going to bring that unseen face right down to mine, hat brushing my forehead, and whatever was under there would finally show itself. Instead, he straightened, slowly, effortlessly, like there were no joints to crack, no muscles to pull. He stepped back, except step isn't the right word. He adjusted, and suddenly he was in the corner again, arms at his sides, hat straight. He stayed there the rest of the night. I didn't. I got up. I paced. I laughed once, a sharp, ugly sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I went into the living room and turned all the lights on, even though it was 3 in the morning. He was everywhere and nowhere. Every time I looked into a doorway, I expected to see him. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I saw empty space and felt relieved and disappointed at the same time. On the 10th day, I tried to run, not just a drive around the block, not another lap past my brother's house. I packed a bag, clothes, charger, the bottle of cheap whiskey under the sink. I grabbed my keys with hands that shook. I didn't look at the corners of the room. He didn't try to stop me. He stood by the bedroom window, hat brushing the curtain rod. His body cut the light in a way that shouldn't have been possible given the way he never cast a shadow. I walked around him with my eyes on the floor. Downstairs, the air felt clearer. The sky over the parking lot was hard blue, the sun so bright it made my eyes water. I didn't look to see if he was in the lot. I just got in my car and drove. I took the highway out of town. No destination, just away. The city thinned. Strip malls gave way to empty exits. The radio played static and Christmas songs in equal measure. I turned it off. 2 hours out, there was a rest stop. One of those isolated ones with a single low building, a few vending machines, and a stretch of woods behind it. The parking lot was mostly empty. A couple of trucks, a minivan with a faded family vacation sticker on the back. I pulled in and parked as far from the building as I could get. For a moment, I let myself breathe. No tall shapes in my peripheral vision. No Santa hat on the horizon. Maybe I thought, maybe it's tied to the city, to the post office, to that drawer. Maybe distance matters. I got out of the car on shaky legs and went into the building. The smell hit me first, stale coffee, disinfectant, something vaguely floral from the air fresheners. The bathroom was empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. One of the faucets dripped, each drop echoing more than it should have. I gripped the sink and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like shit. Bloodshot eyes, grayish skin, a week's worth of uneven stubble. I could almost see the ghost of the person I used to be under all that. "You're fine," I told my reflection. "You made it. You outran it. You're..." My reflection shifted. Not much, just a darkening at the edge of the frame. Behind me, between the sinks and the door, something tall unfolded. The Santa hat bloomed into view over my shoulder in the mirror, red against the yellow-white tiles. I turned around. He was there, of course, standing between me and the door, arms hanging almost to the floor. The sinks came up somewhere around his knees. The hat almost scraped the drop ceiling. The room went quiet. The dripping stopped. The buzzing lights seemed to dim around him. I backed up until my hips hit the sink. A trucker pushed the door open a second later, shoving right through his arm. The door passed through where his shoulder should have been. The man grunted, adjusted his cap, and went into a stall. He didn't glance at me. He didn't react to the Arctic blast that hit me like a wall when the body passed through mine. I didn't drive any farther after that. I got back in my car, turned around, and went home. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The entire ride back, I felt like I was being watched from a distance that didn't have a number. By the time I pulled onto my street, he was already there across from my building as if he'd never left. On the 11th day, he stopped following and started waiting. That sounds like a small difference. It didn't feel small. Before, he'd be where I was, across from my apartment, in a grocery store, in my brother's subdivision, like a glitch that popped up wherever my life still scraped against normal. Now he got there first. I decided to go somewhere, and he'd already be there when I arrived. Not just in obvious places, in places that made sense, like he'd thought about it. I went to the pharmacy to pick up sleeping pills. He was already standing at the corner of the parking lot, towering over the flickering sign. I went to the corner store for cigarettes. He was in the narrow aisle between the coolers, head tilted just enough that the hat scraped the exposed ductwork. I tried to trick him, leaving my apartment without deciding where I was going until I was halfway down the block. I turned left instead of right at the last possible second. He was there, not right in front of me, not in my face, just where he'd need to be the first thing I'd see if I looked up. It felt like walking into rooms he'd redecorated, like I was living on a path he already knew by heart. That was the day Nora finally called. I almost didn't pick up. I'd been ignoring half my calls at that point. Unknown numbers. HR. My mom. Done. But when I saw her name on the screen, my stomach dropped. I answered. Hey, I said, voice rough. You see him yet? She asked. No hello, no build-up. Yes, I said. How many days? She asked. 11, I said. She sucked in a sharp breath. Shit, she said. You really broke the rule, huh? Wax letter, I said. Lucas's. You idiot, she said, but there wasn't much heat in it. Mostly fear. They told you. I know, I said. I thought I was prepared. I'm not. Yeah, she said softly. Nobody is. Did Carlo call you? I asked. When it started? First night, she said. Said there was a guy in a Santa hat across from his building. Joked about how tall he was. Sent that picture. I told him not to look, to stay away from mirrors, to avoid anything shiny. Does that do anything? I asked. No, she said, but it makes you feel like you're trying. I pressed my fingers against my temple. How many? I asked. Before me. How many people broke the rule and saw him? Since I've been there, she said. 4. Carlo was the 4th. You're 5. What about before? I said. She sighed. They don't talk about those, she said. But the rule went into effect for a reason. You think management rewrote policy in the 90s because they were bored. So nobody's made it past 13 days, I said. Nobody's beaten it. There was a long pause on the line. Nobody I've heard of, she said eventually. I swallowed. What did they try? I asked. Before they, running, she said. Like you. Leaving town. Churches. Hospitals. Locking themselves in rooms with no reflective surfaces. Drugs. Drinking. One guy tried to get himself arrested, so he'd be in a cell with cameras on him 24/7. What happened? I asked. He hung himself with the bedsheets on day 13, she said. Kamera glitched. Staff found him 10 minutes later. Jesus, I whispered. Carlo swore was inside the stairwell with him, she said quietly. Said he could feel the hat brushing the ceiling when it leaned over the railing. He texted me that he was going to stay in his apartment, sit in the middle of the room, and not move. Just wait it out. Like if he didn't give an excuse, maybe it would get bored. How'd that work out? I asked, even though I already knew. You know, she said, they say he slipped, missed a step, broke his neck. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to each other breathe. I'm sorry, she said eventually. I know that doesn't help, but I am. I like you. Liked. I said, like, she corrected quickly. Saw the bad wording. Maybe it was right the first time, I said. Don't do that, she said sharply. Don't start saying goodbye like you're already gone. You've still got time. Time for what? I asked, counting down. Time to, I don't know, put things in order. Tell people what they need to hear. If you believe any of us about this, you know how it ends. Use that. You mean mend fences? I said. Apologize. Go to confession. Make peace. If that's your thing, she said. It wasn't Carlos. He spent the last 2 days calling everyone he knew and telling them to go fuck themselves. A laugh burst out of me, raw and unexpected. Maybe I'll do a mix, I said. Just don't spend it pretending it's not happening, she said. That's the part that eats you alive before he gets a chance. I thought of my brother, my mom, my nephew's small hands gripping a pencil too tight. I don't think they want to hear from me, I said. Then tell someone who does, she said. Tell strangers. Yell into the void. I don't know. Just don't lock it all in your head and let them live there rent-free. Yeah, I said faintly. Okay. If you see him inside again, she added, voice dropping, whatever you do, don't let yourself think you know what's under the hat. That's when he leans closer. How do you know that? I asked. Because I've watched too many people try to describe it, she said. And they all stop the same way. Ow! She was quiet for a beat. They just stopped, she said, mid-sentence, like they ran out of words. Or like something pulled the plug. The line crackled. I gotta go, she said. Shift change. Nora, I said. Yeah. Thanks, I said. For what? She asked. For telling me the truth, I said. Everybody else keeps trying to sell me a Hallmark special. She snorted. Yeah, well, this isn't that, she said. If you last long enough to have ideas, let me know. God knows management doesn't want to hear it, but I do. Sure, I said. If I live long enough to invent monster repellent, you'll be my first call. Asshole, she said, affection in it, and hung up. On the 12th day, he stopped pretending he wasn't inside. He didn't sneak into reflections. He didn't wait at the edge of the room like a patient predator. He was just there from the second I opened my eyes. I woke up to the feeling of being watched, the way you do in a crowded room when someone's staring at you. Except there was nobody else in the apartment. I rolled over and saw him. He was in the corner of my bedroom, same place he'd retreated to after leaning over the bed that night. Except this time, he was closer, barely a foot between his body and the mattress. The Santa hat almost brushed the ceiling. For a second, I thought maybe I'd shrunk. The room felt smaller, like it had been built around him, not me. The air smelled different, not like cologne or sweat or anything human. Like hot dust and melted wax. Like the inside of an old candle that's been burned too long, the wick drowning in its own softened sides. I tried to breathe shallowly, but the smell got in anyway. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I flinched so hard I almost fell off the bed. A text from an unknown number popped up on the screen. This is HR. Need address to send separation paperwork. Please respond. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out high and a little hysterical. He didn't move. I slid off the bed on the opposite side from him and shuffled along the wall to the door. I kept him in my peripheral vision without looking directly at the place the hat met whatever passed for his head. The kitchen was empty. For once, no hat reflected in the espresso machine or the black TV screen. For a moment, I let myself believe maybe he was confined to the bedroom. Maybe he'd picked that as our arena. Maybe if I left, he'd stay. Then I went back to the bedroom. He was closer, not dramatically, not so much I could prove it, but enough that the part of my brain that had been tracking his position like a security camera knew something had shifted. He never moved when I looked directly at him, only between looks, like those shitty Christmas decorations in malls that show up in different places each time you walk around, insisting they've been there all along. I didn't go to my brother's house that day. I didn't call my mom. I didn't text Nora. I sat on the couch with the TV off, staring at the dark screen, 30 seconds of courage away from writing something down and mailing it somewhere that would never answer me. I thought about writing to Santa, a letter in my own hand, sealed with whatever I could melt on my stove, asking what he wanted, offering a trade, my life for my nephews, information for Mercy. I thought about lighting a candle and watching the wax drip and seeing if anything formed when it cooled. I thought about going down to the post office, breaking in, and setting the drawer on fire just to see what would happen. I did none of that. Instead, I opened a blank document on my laptop. I watched the cursor blink. I started typing. I worked at the post office 2 weeks ago. It felt stupid. It felt pointless. It also felt like the only thing I had left that wasn't just waiting. I wrote and deleted and wrote again. I rubbed my eyes when the words started blurring. I drank coffee that tasted like ash. He moved around the apartment while I wrote. I'd look up, and he'd be in the hallway, hat just visible above the doorframe. I'd look down at the keyboard, type for a bit, look up again, and he'd be in the doorway to the kitchen. At one point, I went into the bathroom and found him standing over the tub, arms trailing past the faucet. The hat almost touched the overhead light. The bulb flickered like it was struggling under the weight of him. He never touched me, never made a sound. By sunset, my whole body hummed like I'd mainlined caffeine and fear in equal parts. I ate a piece of bread because my hands were shaking too much to use a knife. I took a sip of water and gagged. When it got dark, I went back into the bedroom. He was waiting, not in the corner, not at the foot of the bed, right beside it on my side, bent at the waist until the hat filled my vision. Up close, the red looked wrong, darker than it should have, like it had soaked up something over the years. The white trim was grayish, matted, like it had been dragged through soot. The smell of hot wax was stronger. Underneath it, something like paper that's been singed but not fully burned. My brain tried to fill in the blank space under the hat with a face. Human at first, then wrong. Teeth too long. No mouse. Empty hole. Every time it conjured something, the image fizzled out like a bad channel. The hat dipped lower. He didn't touch me. He never touched me. But the air between us felt thick like water, and I was drowning in it. For a second, I thought he was going to tip the hat up, show me what was underneath. End the game. Then, impossibly, folding in ways joints shouldn't fold, he straightened and flowed back into the corner. If a shadow could sigh, that's what it felt like. He stayed there the rest of the night, watching me. I didn't sleep, obviously. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling and thought about the drawer at work, about all the wax letters I'd handled without reading, about the one I had. I thought about Lucas. What had he done so far? Slipped something into his mom's drink? Pushed a kid too hard on the playground? Hurt animals because Santa said it was practice? What was he going to do next year? And the year after that? Did the 12 days come for him eventually? Or did he get something else? A promotion, a different kind of visitation. I thought about going to their house, breaking a window, grabbing my nephew and running. I picture myself in handcuffs, my brother screaming, Natalie crying, Lucas confused and scared and angry. I pictured him in a few years, writing another neat little letter in careful pencil, thanking Santa for making everything better after some unspecified tragedy. The thought made me want to put my fist through the wall. Instead, I kept typing. I wrote everything I could remember, every stupid detail, every smell, every sound, every little thing my brain grabbed onto as this lumbering horror moved closer and closer. At some point, the sky started to lighten. The hat in the corner dipped, just a fraction, like a nod. The pressure in the room eased by a degree I wouldn't have noticed if it hadn't been crushing me for days. It wasn't gone. It was just waiting. Tomorrow is the 13th day. He's standing a few feet in front of me right now. Not in the corner. Not at the edge of my bedroom. Right here in the living room, between me and the door, hat just below the ceiling. Every time I glance up from this screen, he's there. Sometimes a little closer, sometimes a little farther. Always dead center, like he's framing the exit. I don't know what happens tonight. I know what happened to Carlo. I know what happened to the others. I know that every single one of them said the same thing. In one way or another, he never rushed. He never chased. He just got closer and closer until there was nowhere left to go. I'm posting this here because I don't know what else to do. I can't go to the cops and say, Santa's murder hat ghost is after me because I read cursed mail. I can't go to my brother and say, hey, the thing grooming your son is real and wearing a hat. Maybe don't let him write letters anymore. I can't look my mom in the eye and tell her that the last time she saw me, there was something tall standing behind her in the hallway, and she didn't notice. You're strangers. You can choose to believe me or not. You can call this a story and upvote it and feel a chill and go back to your life. I don't get to go back. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not even asking to be saved. I don't think that's on the table anymore. Well, I do want our ideas. If any of you have seen something like this, anything with rules, with patterns, tell me. If you know anything about things that answer letters, that hide behind costumes and stories and holiday bullshit, tell me. You want a list? Here's what I know. It started when I finished a wax-sealed letter addressed to Santa that I wasn't supposed to read. Everyone who's done that in my department has died after 12 days of being watched by this thing. Nobody else can see him. They walk through him like he's not there. They shiver at the cold, maybe, and move on. He never touches me. Not physically, but every time he gets closer, something in my head hurts like I'm trying to remember something someone made me forget. He likes corners, doorways, boundaries. Sometimes he's outside, sometimes he's inside, sometimes he's hiding in the glass when I don't expect it. The Santa hat never falls off, no matter how he bends, no matter how close the ceiling is. It never changes. It just tilts. The smell of hot wax gets stronger when he leans in. Nobody has made it past day 13 that I know of. That's it. That's my lore. That's my entire inventory of things I could throw at him. If this is some psychological break, then fine, I'll wake up in a hospital somewhere with a needle in my arm and a heavy dose of antipsychotics, and we'll all have a good laugh about how I turned my boring mail job into a horror movie in my head. If it's not, then tonight something is going to happen, and tomorrow somebody's going to find me in a way that makes sense on paper. Slipped, fell, heart gave out, whatever. Maybe I'll make it that far. Maybe I won't. He's a lot closer now. If you got anything, rituals, stories, tricks, even just bullshit people tell themselves to pretend they're not powerless, I'll take it. I don't care if it involves writing my own letter, burning something, saying some name. I'll try it. I'll try anything that doesn't involve hurting someone else. I used to move packages and letters so people could forget about them. This one won't be forgotten, not by me, not in the time I've got left. So please, if there's any way to break a promise made in pencil to something wearing a Santa hat, if there's any way to interrupt whatever pattern this thing thinks it owns, tell me.